The first time the police rolled onto my land, I thought it was a mistake. I was elbow deep in a 1967 Mustang, my grandfather's pride and joy when I heard tires crunch over gravel. Through the open bay door of his old workshop, sunlight gleamed off the hood of a black and white cruiser idling near my fence line. Grease-streaked hands, faded jeans, and sawdust in my hair didn't exactly look like a threat, but there they were. "Can I help you, officers?" I called out, stepping into the late afternoon heat. The older, Kappa, grizzled veteran with tired eyes and a notepad already in hand gave a curt nod. "Are you Marcus Webb?" "That's me. We got a complaint," he said, scanning my property like it was a crime scene. "Unpermitted structures." I almost laughed. Unpermitted. This land's been in my family since 1952. My grandfather built that workshop with his own 2 hands. I inherited it free and clear 10 years ago, long before any HOA existed out here. He flipped a page in his notes. "The Riverside Meadows HOA says you're violating community standards." "Community standards?" I repeated. "Not even in their HOA." But that didn't matter to Patricia Blackwood. She'd moved into a 4,000-square-foot McMansion overlooking my 15-acre ranch just 5 years ago, part of the luxury development that swallowed up the old farmland around me. Her cookie-cutter mansion, with its sterile lawn and designer landscaping, loomed over my weathered farmhouse, my chicken coop, my vegetable garden, my home, and she hated it. She'd offered me $500,000 to sell, then $1 million, then $2 million. Each time, her smile grew tighter, her tone sharper, till she finally dropped the act. "You're being unreasonable, Mr. Webb. Your property is an eyesore. We're prepared to make life very difficult for you." And she did. Over the next few months, the police showed up 9 times, 9 false pretenses. Noise complaints from my table saw, livestock odor from 6 backyard chickens, accusations I was running an illegal auto shop, even a claim I was storing explosives in my workshop. Each time, the officers left, shaking their heads, muttering about wasted resources. But I wasn't just enduring it, I was documenting it. Every call, every false report, every veiled threat. I recorded conversations, saved timestamps, filed few requests for police logs, and consulted my lawyer, Daniel Morrison, a property rights bulldog who doesn't lose cases lightly. Then came the day Patricia rolled up in her silver Mercedes with Richard Chunna, big-name developer, and another suit in tow. They offered $8 million in cash. $8 million. For a moment, the number hung in the air like a ghost. But this land, it was never about money. It was about blood, sweat, legacy. "I'm not interested," I said. Patricia's mask shattered. "You'll regret this," she hissed. "We'll bury you in legal fees." I pulled out my phone, showed her the red recording light. "I've got everything, every call, every lie. My lawyer thinks we've got a strong case for harassment, fraud, abuse of process, maybe even defamation." Her face went pale. They left in a cloud of dust. 2 weeks later, we filed suit. Turns out, the HOA had been illegally claiming jurisdiction over my property in their sales documents, telling buyers my land was under their covenants. That's not just overreach, it's fraud. And it had cost me opportunities for years. Their insurer saw our evidence recordings, police logs, sworn affidavits, and settled within 60 days for $1.2 million. Patricia was ousted as HOA president. In an emergency vote, Richard Chen quietly vanished from county development plans, and the calls to the police stopped. Now, I'm rebuilding my chicken coop bigger than before. I'm knee-deep in a 1972 Corvette, and every time I fire up that engine, I think of Patricia's noise complaints, and I grin. I used part of the settlement to start a legal defense fund for other landowners facing HOA bullies. Daniel and I have already won 3 more cases. They say my property's worth $10 to $12 million now, maybe more, but it's not for sale, because some things are worth more than money, like standing your ground, hey. So tonight, we're going to dive into what dating was like in the Victorian era. And trust me, if you think modern dating is complicated with all the apps and mixed signals, wait until you hear about the maze of etiquette books, chaperones, and social rules that governed every single interaction between men and women back then. We're talking about a time when even making eye contact had rules, when a lifted hat was basically a text message, and when receiving a gift from the wrong person could ruin your reputation forever. And if you're enjoying these stories, I'd really appreciate a like or subscribe. Super curious where you're all listening from, so drop a comment with your location. Always blows my mind how people are falling asleep to this all over the world. All right, find that cozy spot, take a nice slow breath, and just let your body sink into whatever you're lying on. We're heading back to London in the height of the Victorian age, and trust me, you're going to be real grateful for that mattress by the time we're done. The Victorians had a saying about making love, but it didn't mean what you think. Back then, making love meant courtship, the art of wooing someone properly. And if you wanted to survive the Victorian dating scene, you'd better know the rules. So, congratulations, you've just woken up in the heart of London, but not the London you know. This is Queen Victoria's London, where coal smoke hangs thick as fog in the morning air, where horse hooves clatter against cobblestones outside your window, and where the smell, the smell is something else entirely. The Thames down the street carries all the waste from over 2 million people, and on warm days like today, that scent drifts right through your bedroom window. Your nose wrinkles involuntarily as you pull the heavy wool blankets up to your chin. The good news is, you're 22 years old and from a respectable middle-class family. Your father owns a small but successful haberdashery shop, which means you've got enough money for decent clothes and food, but not enough to be completely idle. The bad news? You're a woman in the Victorian era, which means your entire future hinges on one thing: finding a suitable husband. And the rules for doing that are about as complicated as learning to waltz while juggling teacups. You stretch your legs under the rough cotton sheets, feeling the weight of the heavy quilt pressing down on your chest. There's no central heating. In this house, it won't be invented for decades. So every morning starts with a bone-deep chill that seeps through the stone walls. Your housemaid has already been up since dawn, lighting the coal fires downstairs, and you can hear her heavy footsteps on the wooden stairs as she carries the coals scuttle up to start the fire in your bedroom. Great, that scuttle weighs about 30 pounds when it's full, and she carried dozens of them up and down these stairs. Before the day is done, the bedroom door creaks open, and Mary slips in. Her arms strain with the weight of the coal, her hands already black with soot. You notice the way she favors her left shoulder, probably strained from all that lifting. She kneels by your fireplace, and you watch her skilled hands arrange the kindling and coal with quick, practiced movements. The first spark catches, then spreads, and soon there's a small orange glow pushing back against the morning cold. "Good morning," Miss Mary says, wiping her hands on her apron. "Your mother says you're to dress properly today. The Weatherbys are calling this afternoon and they're bringing their son." Your stomach does a little flip. The Weatherbys? You've heard about their son, Thomas, 26 years old, recently returned from India, where he worked as a clerk for the East India Company. Your mother has been hinting about this visit for weeks, and you know exactly what it means. This isn't just a social call. This is an inspection. You sit up in bed, feeling the cool air hit your shoulders through your cotton nightgown. The fire is already making the room warmer, but it'll be another hour before the chill really leaves. You watch Mary move around the room, laying out your clothes for the day, not just any clothes, but your best day dress. Dark blue wool with tiny mother Yuval pearl buttons that took your mother 3 months to save up for. "Mary," you say, your voice still rough with sleep, "what do you know about the Weatherby son?" She glances toward the door, then leans closer. "Well, miss, I heard tell from their housemaid that he's got all his teeth, which is more than can be said for most gentlemen his age, and she says he doesn't drink overmuch, though he does have a fondness for cigars." She pauses, arranging your corset on the bed. "Of course, he's been in India these past 4 years, so he might have picked up some strange ideas about things." The corset. You look at it with resignation. Every morning, Mary will lace you into this contraption of whalebone and cotton that squeezes your ribs until you can barely breathe properly. It's designed to give you that perfect hourglass silhouette that's fashionable right now. But it also means you'll spend the entire day feeling like someone's got their hands wrapped around your waist. Squeezing gently but persistently, you swing your legs out of bed and your bare feet hit the cold wooden floor. The floorboards are wide planks of oak, polished smooth by decades of usand. They're always cold, no matter how warm the fire gets. You stand up, and Mary immediately starts unlacing your nightgown. This is normal. Privacy, as you know, doesn't really exist for women. Mary has like family, like the words my grandfather whispered to me as a boy, hammer in hand, dirt under his boots. They can make you offers, Marcus, but they can't make you sell. I remember, Grandpa. I remember. Second, you must not touch him in any way. No shaking hands unless he's formally introduced by your father, and even then, keep it brief. If he offers you his arm, you may take it lightly, but otherwise, keep your hands folded in your lap. You think about how strange this must seem to young people today, where casual touching is so normal. But in the Victorian era, physical contact between unmarried people is serious business. Even engaged couples are limited to holding hands and perhaps exchanging chaste kisses, always under supervision. Third, let him lead the conversation, but don't be afraid to show intelligence. He's been educated, so he'll appreciate a woman who can discuss something beyond the weather, but don't contradict him directly. Even if you disagree, find gentle ways to express different viewpoints. This is a delicate balance. Too much intelligence, and you risk being seen as unfeminine or threatening. Too little, and you might appear boring or stupid. You've been practicing this balancing act your entire life. Finally, your mother says, reaching over to adjust a curl near your ear. Remember that he's assessing you as much as you're assessing him. Watch how he treats the servants, how he speaks to your father, how he responds when things don't go exactly as planned. These small things will tell you much more about his character than his polite parlor conversation. She stands up, brushing imaginary lint from her skirt. The Weatherbees will arrive precisely at the appointed hour. We'll serve tea, and the small cakes that cook made yesterday will sit on the settee near the window. The light is flattering. There, and I'll sit in the chair nearby. Your father will join us after he's spoken with Mr. Weatherby about business matters. After your mother leaves, you find yourself with several hours to fill before the afternoon's performance. You walk downstairs to the family's small library, really just a room with 2 bookcases and a window seat, and select a volume of poetry. It's socially acceptable for young ladies to read poetry, though novels are still considered somewhat questionable. You settle into the window seat and try to concentrate on the verses. But your mind keeps wandering to the afternoon ahead. The house around you is coming to life. You can hear cook banging pots in the kitchen as she prepares the midday meal. The housemaid is sweeping the front steps, a job that has to be done twice daily because of all the coal smoke and horse droppings in the street. Your father is in his study, going over the shop's account books. The house smells of coal fire, beeswax, polish, and the lavender water your mother uses to freshen the linens. Through the window, you watch the street outside. A milk cart rolls by, the driver calling out his wares in a voice that carries clearly through the glass. 2 ladies walk past, their skirts swaying with each step, their arms linked as they chat. They're both wearing the same style of dress as you, dark colors, full skirts, tight bodices, but you can tell from the quality of their fabric that they come from wealthier families. Behind them walks their maid, carrying their parcels and staying a respectful distance behind. A gentleman on horseback trots past, sitting straight in his saddle, his top hat perfectly positioned. He's wearing a dark coat with tails and light-colored trousers, the standard daytime outfit for men of his class. As he passes your window, he touches the brim of his hat in a polite greeting, even though he doesn't know you. This is normal. Gentlemen are expected to acknowledge ladies, even strangers, with this small gesture of respect. The morning passes slowly. You read a few poems, help your mother arrange flowers for the front parlor, and practice a piece on the piano. Playing music is one of the accomplishments expected of young ladies, along with speaking a little French, doing needlework, and being able to sketch passably well. You're not expected to be brilliant at any of these things, just competent enough to demonstrate that you've had a proper education. Lunch is a simple affair: cold meat, bread, cheese, and pickled vegetables. You eat lightly, partly because your corset makes large meals uncomfortably, and partly because you're too nervous to have much appetite. Your mother chatters about neighbors and local gossip, but you can tell she's nervous too. A good marriage for you would solve several of the family's financial concerns and secure your future. No pressure. At half an hour before the appointed time, your mother declares it's time for final preparations. You go upstairs to check your appearance one more time. Mary has laid out fresh gloves, white cotton ones, that button at the wristband, your small locket, the only jewelry considered appropriate for an unmarried lady receiving visitors. The locket contains a miniature portrait of your grandmother, and it rests just below the high neckline of your dress. You practice sitting down gracefully, which is more challenging than it sounds when you're wearing all these layers. The trick is to lower yourself slowly, letting your skirts settle around you in an attractive arrangement. Then fold your hands in your lap. Getting up requires pushing down on the arms of the chair and rising smoothly without showing any of the effort involved. At 10 minutes before the appointed hour, you're stationed in the front parlor, sitting on the settee as instructed. Your mother sits nearby in her chair, needlework in her lap to give her hands something to do. Your father stands by the fireplace, checking his pocket watch every few minutes. The room smells of beeswax and the fresh flowers your mother arranged. This morning, late afternoon sunlight streams through the windows, and you hope it's as flattering as your mother promised. The clock on the mantel ticks toward the hour. Each second feels longer than the last. Your palms are slightly damp inside your gloves, and you resist the urge to fidget with your skirt. This is it, the beginning of what could be the rest of your life. At exactly the appointed time, there's a firm knock at the front door. Your father opens it, and you hear the low murmur of male voices in the entrance hall, formal greetings, the rustle of coats being removed, the sharp tap of walking sticks being placed in the umbrella stand. Then footsteps approach the parlor, and your heart hammers against the rigid stays of your corset. Mr. Weatherby enters, First Thomas's father, a distinguished gentleman with silver whiskers and a slight stoop that suggests hours bent over account books. Behind him comes Mrs. Weatherby, a round woman in burgundy silk, whose jewelry catches the afternoon light, and, finally, Thomas himself steps through the doorway. He's taller than you expected, with brown hair parted precisely down the middle, and mutton chop whiskers that frame a lean face. His skin has a golden undertone that speaks of his years in the Indian sun, and when he moves, there's a careful precision to his gestures that suggests military training. He's wearing a black frock coat that reaches his knees, gray trousers, and a white shirt with a high collar that looks like it might strangle him if he turns his head too quickly. Mr. and Mrs. Weatherby, your father says formally, may I present my wife, Mrs. Hartwell, and my daughter, Miss Eleanor Hartwell. You rise from the settee slowly, gracefully, letting your skirt settle around you as you've practiced 1,000 times. You offer a small curtsy, just a dip of your knees and a slight incline of your head. Too deep would suggest you're of lower status. Too shallow would appear disrespectful, Miss Hartwell. Mrs. Weatherby says warmly, what a pleasure to finally meet you. Thomas has been quite eager for this introduction. Thomas steps forward and offers a brief bow. Miss Hartwell. His voice is deeper than you expected, with just a hint of an accent you can't quite place, perhaps picked up during his time overseas. Mr. Weatherby, you reply, meeting his eyes briefly before lowering your gaze. Direct eye contact is acceptable for the initial greeting, but prolonged staring would be considered brazen. Everyone settles into their assigned positions, like actors taking their marks on a stage. Thomas sits in the chair across from you, enough for conversation, but far enough to maintain propriety. The parents arrange themselves as subtle chaperones present, but attempting to appear absorbed in their own discussion about mutual acquaintances and local news. I trust your journey from India was pleasant. You venture since it's acceptable for ladies to ask about travel. Indeed, though rather lengthy, Thomas replies. 3 months aboard ship provides ample time for reflection. I found myself quite ready to return to English soil and English society. He pauses, and you catch something in his tone, perhaps relief, perhaps something else. The climate there can be challenging for those of us unaccustomed to such intensity. You nod sympathetically, though you've never been farther from London than Brighton. I imagine the heat must be quite overwhelming. We complain when our summers reach 70 degrees. Quite so. In Bombay, we often saw temperatures above 100 degrees, with humidity that made the very air feel thick as soup. He shifts in his chair, and you notice how he unconsciously loosens his collar just slightly. I confess, I developed a great appreciation for English rain during my time away. This draws a small smile from you, a genuine one, not the practiced parlor smile your mother taught you. Rain is certainly something we have in abundance. The conversation continues in this careful dance. Thomas tells you about the markets in Bombay, the exotic fruits he learned to enjoy, the challenge of managing clerks who spoke a dozen different languages. You share your own much smaller experiences, the books you've been reading, the music you've been practicing. Everyone settles into their assigned positions, like actors taking their marks on a stage. Thomas sits in the chair across from you close, enough for conversation, but far enough to maintain propriety. The parents arrange themselves as subtle chaperones present, but attempting to appear absorbed in their own discussion about mutual acquaintances and local news. I trust your journey from India was pleasant. You venture since it's acceptable for ladies to ask about travel. Indeed, though rather lengthy, Thomas replies. 3 months aboard ship provides ample time for reflection. I found myself quite ready to return to English soil and English society. He pauses, and you catch something in his tone, perhaps relief, perhaps something else. The climate there can be challenging for those of us unaccustomed to such intensity. You nod sympathetically, though you've never been farther from London than Brighton. I imagine the heat must be quite overwhelming. We complain when our summers reach 70 degrees. Quite so. In Bombay, we often saw temperatures above 100 degrees, with humidity that made the very air feel thick as soup. He shifts in his chair, and you notice how he unconsciously loosens his collar just slightly. I confess I developed a great appreciation for English rain during my time away. This draws a small smile from you, a genuine one, not the practiced parlor smile your mother taught you. Rain is certainly something we have in abundance. The conversation continues in this careful dance. Thomas tells you about the markets in Bombay, the exotic fruits he learned to enjoy, the challenge of managing clerks who spoke a dozen different languages. You share your own much smaller experiences, the books you've been reading, the music you've been practicing, your observations about life in London. Each topic is safe, appropriated, designed to reveal character without venturing into anything too personal. But you're also watching him, as your mother advised. When Mary enters to serve tea, you notice how Thomas nods politely to her, a small acknowledgement that many gentlemen of his class wouldn't bother with. When your father makes a joke about the weather, Thomas laughs, not the forced chuckle of social obligation, but genuine amusement that reaches his eyes. When Mrs. Weatherby accidentally knocks over her teacup, sending hot liquid splashing across the small table, Thomas immediately rises to help, producing a clean handkerchief without being asked, "Oh, how clumsy of me." Mrs. Weatherby flutters, dabbing at the spill. "Not at all," your mother soothes, while Mary quickly appears with a cloth to clean up the mess. These things happen, but you've noticed something else. When the teacup clattered to the floor, Thomas flinched a knot. Just a normal startle response, but something deeper. His hands tensed for just a moment, and his eyes darted toward the door, as if assessing an exit route. It lasted only seconds before he regained his composure, but you filed the observation away. Something about sudden loud noises affects him more than it should. The formal portion of the visit lasts exactly 1 hour, as etiquette demands. Any shorter would suggest disinterest. Any longer would be presumptuous. As the Weatherbys prepare to leave, Thomas requests a brief word with your father, a conversation that takes place in the hallway, just out of earshot, but visible to everyone in the parlor. Through the doorway, you watch your father nod several times. Thomas gestures occasionally as he speaks, his hands moving with that same careful precision you noticed earlier. After perhaps 5 minutes, they shake hands, and your father's expression suggests the conversation went well. "Miss Hartwell," Thomas says, returning to the parlor, "with your father's permission, I would be honored to call on you again perhaps next week, if that would be agreeable." Your heart does a little skip. This is it, the formal beginning of courtship. "That would be very pleasant, Mr. Weatherby." After they leave, your mother immediately begins the post-visit analysis. She says, settling back into her chair, good posture, clean fingernails, polite to the servants. "And did you notice how he helped when I spilled the tea? Shows consideration." Your father joins the discussion. He saved quite a respectable sum during his time in India, enough to establish a household without requiring assistance from either family, and his prospects with the company appear sound. But you're thinking about that moment when the teacup fell, about the careful way Thomas moved, about the slight tightness around his eyes when he spoke of the challenging climate in India. There are layers here that the formal courtship process isn't designed to reveal. The next visit arrives with unseasonable warmth. You're dressed in your second-best gown, pale green cotton with tiny white flowers, a color, your mother says, brings out your eyes. This time, there's no corset crisis, no nervous breakfast. You're beginning to understand the rhythm of these visits. Thomas arrives precisely on time, carrying a small bouquet of flowers, acceptable because flowers are temporary and modest, unlike jewelry or books, which might suggest to serious an intent. He's dressed more casually today, in a brown coat and lighter trousers, and he seems more relaxed. "Miss Hartwell," he says, offering the flowers with a slight bow, "I noticed these growing in my mother's garden and thought you might enjoy them. They're sweet peas, delicate purple and white blossoms that smell like springtime and innocence." As you take them, your gloved fingers brush his for just an instant, and you feel a small electric shock that has nothing to do with static from your wool dress. "They're lovely," you say, burying your face in the fragrant petals to hide the flush you feel rising in your cheeks. "Sweet peas are my favorites. I hoped they might be," he says, and there's something in his tone that suggests this choice wasn't as casual as he made it seem. This visit feels different from the first. With the initial formalities out of the way, the conversation flows more naturally. Thomas tells you about his childhood growing up as the youngest of 4 sons, always trying to prove himself worthy of attention. You share stories about your education, the small school you attended, where you learned French and drawing, and enough mathematics to manage household accounts. I confess, Thomas says, during a lull in the conversation, I find London quite overwhelming after 4 years in smaller communities. The noise, the crowds, the pace of everything. Sometimes I wonder if I've forgotten how to be properly English. There's a vulnerability in this admission that surprises you. Gentlemen aren't supposed to express uncertainty or weakness. Yet here he is, acknowledging that the transition home hasn't been as smooth as expected. Perhaps, you say, carefully, it's not about being properly English, but about finding your own way of being English. For years is a long time. You've had experiences that most of us can't imagine. He looks at you with something approaching, surprises if he hadn't expected such understanding. You're very perceptive, Miss Hartwell. Over the following weeks, visits become routine. Thomas calls every week at the appointed hour, staying for exactly the prescribed time. Sometimes you sit in the parlor. Sometimes you walk in the small garden behind your house, always with your mother or Aunt Caroline within sight. The conversations grow deeper, more personal though still bounded by the limits of propriety. You learn that Thomas has nightmares. Sometimes he mentions this obliquely when explaining why he often looks tired on Monday mornings. You discover that he writes poetry, though he's too embarrassed to share any with you. He tells you about the strange foods he learned to enjoy in India, the festivals he witnessed, the complexity of managing business relationships across cultural divides. In return, you share your own carefully guarded thoughts, your frustration with the limits placed on women's education, your secret ambition to travel and see places beyond London's borders, your love of novels, though you're careful not to mention the more scandalous ones you borrow from your friend Catherine during your 4th visit. Thomas makes a request that sends your pulse racing. Miss Hartwell, he says, glancing toward where your mother sits with her needlework, I wonder if you might consent to accompany me to the exhibition at the Crystal Palace with proper chaperonage. Naturally, this is significant. Attending a public event together represents a new level of courtship, a semi-public declaration that you're officially keeping company. Your mother's needle pauses in her embroidery as she waits for your response. I would be delighted, you say, trying to keep your voice steady despite the flutter of excitement in your chest. The Crystal Palace, rebuilt in South London after the Great Exhibition of 1851, represents everything modern and exciting about this Victorian age. The building itself is a marvel of iron and glass, rising from Sydenham Hill like a fairy tale palace made of light and air. Inside, there are gardens, fountains, exhibits from around the world, and enough wonders to fill days of exploration. The day arrives, bright and clear. You're dressed in your absolute best dress of deep blue silk that took your mother 6 months to save for, with a matching jacket and a small hat adorned with ribbons. Your gloves are pristine white kid leather, and you carry a small beaded reticule that contains your handkerchief, smelling salts, and a few coins. Thomas arrives with a hired carriage, an open landau that will allow for proper supervision while providing the adventure of traveling together. Aunt Caroline, selected as chaperone for her stern demeanor and eagle eyes, settles herself in the facing seat. She's wearing. Your heart stops, then races anew. His words brush the edge of serious intent. You glance quickly at Aunt Caroline, but she's absorbed in the careful dissection of a scone. I have enjoyed them as well, you say quietly, your voice barely above a whisper. I had hoped, he begins, then halts, as if catching himself. That is, I wonder if you might consider. He pauses again. Perhaps this is not the proper venue for such discussions. You understand perfectly. He's testing the waters, drawing near the question of engagement without quite asking it, and rightly so. According to every etiquette manual, such matters must first be addressed with your father, then with you, and certainly not in a public tea room with your aunt merely 3 feet away. Perhaps, you say carefully, such discussions might be more appropriately held in a more private setting. The look that passes between you carries enough electricity to power the Crystal Palace's newest gas lamps. He sees it too haven't rejected his implied suit, only deferred to propriety. Relief washes over his features, followed by something deeper, anticipation, perhaps even tenderness. The rest of the afternoon passes in a happy blur. You admire tropical birds, whose plumage gleams in colors with no earthly name. You watch demonstrations of new photographic techniques that capture a person's likeness in minutes rather than hours. You sample fruits whose flavors conjure distant lands you may never see, but beneath the marvels and delights, a quiet current runs between you, a sense of approaching change, of decisions that will reshape your life forever. By the time the carriage returns you home beneath a dusky sky, you know everything is about to shift. One evening, a storm rattles the windows, rain hammering the glass in thick sheets. You're in the parlor with your mother, embroidering by lamplight, when the doorbell rings an unusual hour for callers. Mary appears in the doorway, flustered. "Begging your pardon, ma'am," she says, "but Mr. Thomas Weatherby is at the door. Says he needs to speak with the master urgently." Your mother's eyebrows lift nearly to her hairline. Your father emerges from his study, newspaper in hand, equally puzzled. Through the parlor window, you glimpse Thomas's carriage, waiting in the downpour, the horse stamping as water streams from its mane. "Show him into the study," your father says after a moment. "El Niño and your mother remain here." Of course, you strain to hear every muffled word from across the hall, the low murmur of men's voices. Your father's occasional indeed, Thomas's longer, unreadable replies. The conversation stretches into what feels like an eternity. Your embroidery hoop forgotten in your lap, your pulse thrumming so fiercely it makes the cameo brooch at your collar tremble. At last, footsteps approach. Your father enters alone, but his expression gives everything away. "Elenina," he says, satisfaction and something softer in his voice. "Mr. Weatherby has asked for permission to pay his addresses to you. I have given my consent." The hoop slips from your fingers and lands with a soft thud. This is it. After weeks of measured visits and careful words, Thomas wishes to marry you. He would like to speak with you soon, your father continues. Your mother will be present, naturally, but he'll be permitted to make his proposal directly to you. Your mother lets out a small, excited squeak, quickly stifled behind her hand. "Oh, Elenino," we must decide what you'll wear. We should have cook prepare something special. And perhaps move the good china from the cabinet, mother, you interrupt gently. Though your own hands tremble slightly, perhaps we should see what he has to say first. But you already know what he'll say. The question isn't whether he'll propose, it's whether you're truly ready to accept. Marriage, in this age, isn't a partnership you can dissolve if it falters. Once you say yes, your legal existence fades. Your property becomes his, your money his. Even your children, should you have them, belong to him by law. And yet what choice do you truly have? At 22, whispers of being on the shelf have already begun. Your family cannot support you indefinitely, and Thomas Kind, steady, intelligent, seems genuinely fond of you. In a world where marriages are often matters of ledger and lineage, the possibility of affection feels like extraordinary fortune. The day of his proposal arrives with careful solemnity. You've changed your dress 3 times before settling on soft gray wool with violet trim, serious enough for the occasion, yet lovely enough to remind him why he chose you. Your hair refuses to cooperate, and Mary repins the braided style twice before it holds. When Thomas arrives, he carries a small velvet box. Your stomach twists. He wears his finest black coat, a collar so stiff it looks painful, and his hands tremble just slightly as he removes his gloves. Miss Hartwell, he says formally, but his eyes are warm. He nods respectfully to your mother, seated in the corner with her needlework, close enough to supervise, distant enough to grant the illusion of privacy. You sit on the settee, back straight, hands folded. He takes the chair opposite, the same arrangement as your first meeting, yet now everything feels final, charged. Miss Hartwell, he begins, then stops, drawing a breath. Elenina, and with your permission, I would like to speak directly to your heart. You nod, unable to trust your voice. These weeks of knowing you have been among the happiest of my life, he continues, his confidence growing. Your intelligence, your kindness, your quiet strength, they have shown me I cannot imagine my future without you in it. He slides from his chair to one knee beside the settee, the velvet box open in his hands. Elenina Hartwell, he says, would you do me the tremendous honor of becoming my wife? The ring is modest but exquisite, small diamond framed by pearls in yellow gold, not showy but clearly chosen with care, and no small expense for a man in his position. Yes, you whisper. Then, stronger, yes, Thomas, I would be honored to accept. Relief floods his face so plainly you nearly laugh. He takes your bare left hand, your first ungloved touch, and slides the ring onto your finger. His palm is warm, slightly rough, likely from his years abroad, and the contact sends a shiver up your arm. There, he murmurs, now it's official. From her corner, your mother makes a small, choked sound, happiness barely contained. When you glance over, she's dabbing her eyes with a handkerchief, pretending deep interest in her stitching. The rest of the visit flows in a haze of practicalities. The engagement will be announced publicly. The wedding will be held in time to allow you to prepare your trousseau, and Thomas to secure a home. He's found a small house in Kensington, 3 bedrooms, a proper kitchen, a modest garden. I know it's not grand, he says, a hint of apology in his voice, but it's respectable, and close enough to my office that I can walk in fair weather. It sounds perfect, you assure him, and mean it. The thought of managing your own household, arranging your own space, feels like the height of luxury. After he departs, your mother launches into what she calls engagement planning. Lists appear overnight, purchases to make, relatives to inform, linens to hem. The coming months will be a whirlwind, unlike any you've known. But first, there are the immediate privileges of betrothal. Starting the following week, Thomas is permitted to take you on unchaperoned walks. The first time you step out together, without your mother trailing behind, feels like the most daring thing you've ever done. You stroll slowly through the park near your home, your hand resting lightly on his arm, marveling at this new freedom. For the first time, you can speak without measuring each word for propriety, I confess. Thomas says, as you pause by a fountain where children sail toy boats, I've been terrified for weeks that you might refuse me. Were you really? You ask, surprised. But surely you could tell I enjoyed your company. Enjoyment, he says gently, and willingness to marry are quite different things. He adjusts his grip on his walking stick. I know I'm no grand match, no title, no great fortune, and I carry complications from my time abroad. You think of the way he flinched at sudden noises, the way he sometimes held himself as if guarding against unseen pain. Everyone has complications, Thomas, you say. The question is whether two people can face them together. He stops, walking, and looks at you with an expression you can't quite name. You're very wise for someone so young. I'm not that young, you protest. 22 is quite grown up. Of course it is, he says quickly. I only meant I sometimes feel older than my years. India has a way of aging a person. In the weeks that follow, these unchaperoned walks become precious. Away from parlor constraints, Thomas reveals more of himself. He tells you of the fever that nearly claimed him in Bombay, of colleagues who betrayed him, of the overwhelming relief when the ship finally cleared the harbor for home. You, in turn, share your own guarded truths, sheer fear that you may not be naturally maternal, your frustration with the narrow scope of women's education, your secret dream of learning to paint with real skill, not just the delicate watercolor dabbling deemed suitable. Perhaps, Thomas suggests, one afternoon, as you watch sparrows hop at your feet, you could take proper painting lessons after we're married. We won't be wealthy, but we should be comfortable enough for small luxuries. The casual phrase, after we're married, makes your stomach flutter. It's becoming real, this future you're building together. With walks come other new freedoms. Thomas may now visit the parlor without formal supervision, though he must still depart before nightfall. The first time his fingers interlace with yours as you pore over engravings of Indian temples, you're struck by how natural it feels. Is this proper? You ask, though you don't pull away. Perfectly proper for an engaged couple, he assures you. Though I admit it feels rather scandalous after all those weeks of keeping my hands to myself. You laugh, and the sound surprises you both. It's been so long since you've laughed freely in his presence. Courting was measured, restrained, but engagement brings ease, warmth, the beginnings of true companionship. Soon, letters begin to arrive. It is customary for betrothed couples to correspond, especially when separated by duty. When Thomas travels north for work, you learn to pour your thoughts onto paper. My dear Elenina, his first begins. I've been gone only a short while, yet I miss our conversations more than I anticipated. This city is loud with industry, but I would trade its energy for another quiet walk beside you. You spend an entire evening crafting your reply. 3 pages of careful script, telling him of books read, plans made, small domestic details that feel meaningful when shared with someone who cares. In writing, Thomas is more eloquent, less bound by social form. He speaks of hopes for your marriage, plans for your home, his slow reintegration into English life, and you discover you, too, are freer on the page, able to confess fears as well as dreams, uncertainties as well as excitement. Gifts follow. He gives you a locket with his photograph, formal, serious, slightly younger than he seems now. You send him yours in return, posed in your best dress. Expression composed, but the most intimate gift comes on a rainy afternoon. He appears at your door with a small, wrapped parcel. "This is rather unconventional," he says, slightly embarrassed, "but I thought you might appreciate it." Inside is a leather-bound journal, blank pages waiting. On the first, inscribed in his neat hand, "For Elenina, to record all the thoughts too precious for ordinary conversation." You trace the smooth cover, moved by the quiet thoughtfulness. "It's beautiful, Thomas. Thank you. I have one just like it," he admits. "I thought perhaps we might both keep journals during our engagement, not to share necessarily, but to help us think through all the changes ahead." That night, alone in your room, you make the first entry. You write of the strange mix of joy and fear that comes with approaching marriage, of your growing affection for Thomas, of the overwhelming tide of decisions ahead. The seasons turn. Your mother drags you to endless fittings for your wedding dress, confection of white silk and Brussels lace that costs more than your father's shop earns in months, yet is deemed essential for the family's standing. You spend afternoons learning household arts previously glossed over in your education, meal planning with cook, linen care with Mary, social duties with your mother. But the most vital lessons come from married women in your circle. Your Aunt Margaret, 15 years wed, takes you aside for conversations no one else will have. "Marriage isn't like the novels," she says bluntly. "There will be joy but also difficulty. Your husband will have moods you don't understand. There will be days you wonder what you've done. The key is patience and time." She pauses, studying your face. "And Eleni, there are aspects of married life no one speaks of directly, but you must understand." Your cheeks burn as she explains, in careful euphemisms, what will be expected of you as a wife. It's not the romantic poetry you've read, but it's knowledge you desperately need. As autumn deepens, the house in Kensington is secured. Thomas takes you to see it on a crisp afternoon. It's smaller than your childhood home, but bright, with large windows and a garden just big enough for herbs and flowers. The kitchen is modern built-in storage, a proper range. You run your hands over the wooden counters, imagining yourself here mistress of your own domain. It's thrilling and terrifying in equal measure. Perfect. You sand mean it. Weeks before the wedding, Thomas makes a quiet request, a lock of your hair to keep as a token. It's a common custom, yet deeply intimate. You sit before your mirror as Mary cuts a small strand from behind your ear, unseen beneath your coiffure. You wrap it in tissue, a piece of me to carry with him. In return, he gives you a lock of his own, preserved in a silver locket. "Something of mine to keep close to your heart," he says, simply. The final days rush by in a flurry. Relatives arrive. Your trousseau linens, gowns, household goods fills 2 large trunks. Thomas calls daily, now. The formal distance of early courtship replaced by genuine affection and easy companionship. You find yourself looking forward not just to marriage as duty, but to sharing a life with this man. One afternoon, he takes your hands in the parlor, his expression serious. Elenina, he says, whatever challenges we face as husband and wife, I will always strive to be worthy of the trust you're placing in me, and I will strive to be worthy of yours. You reclined mean every word. Outside, London hums with its ceaseless rhythm. But in that quiet room, with your hand in his, the future feels both certain and full of promise. On the morning of your wedding, the sky is gray and drizzling, the city softened into a watercolor haze. You wake before dawn in your childhood room for the last time, listening to the familiar sounds of the house coming alive. Cook bangs pots below. Your father paces the library, likely rehearsing his speech. Your wedding dress hangs on the wardrobe like a luminous phantom, white silk catching the weak light through rain-streaked glass. Soon, you will put it on and become Mrs. Thomas Weatherby Lenina Hartwell, left behind like a skin-outgrown dot Mary brings. Your breakfast toast and weak tea, your mother's concession to your likely appetite. Your hands shake as you lift the cup. Nervous, Miss Mary asks softly as she lays out your undergarments. Terrified, you admit, then feel guilty. Brides are meant to be joyful, not afraid. Mary nods. That's natural. My sister said the same. Felt like she was jumping off a cliff without knowing what lay below. The words don't comfort, but knowing others have felt this way does. Your mother arrives soon after, dressed in deep purple silk. Mother of the bride, dignified. Aunt Caroline follows, then cousins, neighbors, all armed with pins, ribbons, and strong opinions about your hair. Dressing takes hours. Chemise first, then the corset laced, tighter than ever for the perfect silhouette. Today, discomfort is the price of beauty. The bustle is larger than usual, designed to support your train. 3 petticoats add volume until you feel like you're wearing a small pavilion. When the dress finally settles over your shoulders and Mary fastens the last pearl button, you look in the mirror and hardly recognize yourself, elegant, transformed, worthy of this moment. Your hair is woven with white silk flowers. A lace veil cascades from a borrowed tiara. Your only jewelry, his ring, and your mother's pearls. You look like an angel, she whispers, tears glistening. The carriage ride to the church feels impossibly long and far too brief. Your father sits beside you, silent, occasionally patting your gloved hand. Through rain-blurred windows, London carries on vendors, calling, children leaping puddles as, if unaware your world is ending and beginning. The church looms ahead, its stone darkened by soot, but grand in its solemnity. Guests hurry through the rain, umbrellas like black petals. Your father helps you from the carriage, careful of your train. In the vestibule, the scent of wet wool and old stone fills your lungs. Behind the heavy doors, voices murmur. Ready, my dear? Your father asks. You nod. The doors swing open. The church is full. Candles flicker in the gray light. The organ swells. And then you're walking down the aisle, your train whispering behind you like falling leaves. All you see is Thomas at the altar, hands clasped, waiting. When your eyes meet, he smiles, not the practiced smile of society, but something warmer, truer. A promise. The ceremony blurs ancient words, solemn vows. You hear yourself promise to love, honor, obey, to cleave unto him until death. The weight of those words settles like a mantle when he slips his mother's gold band onto your finger. His hands are steady. I now pronounce you man and wife. It is done. You are married. Legally, socially, irrevocably, Mrs. Thomas Weatherby. His kiss is brief, proper, but in the soft press of his lips, you feel the promise of intimacy to come. As you turn to face the congregation, the world already looks different. The wedding breakfast fills your family home with feasting and laughter. Roasted fowl, honey-glazed ham, a towering cake with sugar flowers. But you eat little, your corset too tight, nerves too high. You sip champagne, smile until your cheeks ache, endure speeches and well wishes. Thomas stays close, deflecting prying questions, offering quiet reassurances. He protects your space even in celebration. As guests drift away, reality settles. Tonight, you will sleep in your new home. The lessons of your aunt will become lived experience. Marriage will shift from ritual to daily life with this man you've known only a short while. By evening, the house is quiet. Your mother urges you to change into your traveling dressed dark green wool, practical for the journey ahead. As Mary unlaces your wedding gown for the last time, you feel yourself shed one life and step into another. Your father loads your trunks. Your mother fusses over gloves, ridicule necessities for the night. Each question hums with unspoken meaning. The goodbyes wrench your heart. Your parents stand on the steps, your mother weeping openly, your father trying and failing to appear stoic. This house has been your entire world for 22 years. Now you are in your own home. Tonight, you will share that bed with a man who was essentially a stranger not long ago. Mrs. Davies appears with a tea tray and offers to help you unpack. But you find yourself craving a few moments alone to absorb everything that has happened. She seems to understand, bustling away with promises to call you when dinner is ready. Dinner is served in the small dining room by candlelight, just you and Thomas at opposite ends of a table that feels both intimate and formal. Mrs. Davies has prepared roasted chicken with vegetables from the garden, and everything tastes wonderful. Though your appetite hasn't fully returned, Thomas tells you about the arrangements he's made for your first days of marriage. No visitors, no social calls, only time for the two of you to grow accustomed to sharing a home. He has taken leave from his office, an uncommon step that speaks to how seriously he regards this new chapter. I thought we might spend tomorrow arranging the books in the library, he suggests over custard. And perhaps you'd like to see the kitchen properly, to discuss meal planning with Mrs. Davies. These ordinary details feel both overwhelming and steadying. This, you realize, is what marriage truly is, not the heightened drama of vows or the fantasy of novels, but the quiet daily work of building a life beside another person. After dinner, you sit together in the parlor. Thomas reads aloud from the evening paper while you try to focus on your embroidery. But the peace feels fragile, shadowed by your awareness of what is expected when you retire for the night. Mrs. Davies returns to bank the fires and secure the house. She bids you both good night with a knowing look that makes your cheeks burn suddenly. You are alone with your husband in your new home. Elenina, Thomas says softly, setting aside his paper. I want you to know. I understand this is all very new for you. There's no need to rush anything, no pressure at all. His kindness moves you deeply, even as it underscores the strangeness of your situation. You care for each other, yes, but not yet well enough to navigate physical intimacy without uncertainty. Thank you, you whisper. That means a great deal to me. When you go upstairs together, Thomas shows you the small dressing room where he'll change, giving you privacy to prepare for bed. Alone in the bedroom, you trade your traveling dress for the fine cotton nightgown from your trousseau and sit at the dressing table to brush your hair in the mirror. You watch yourself perform this familiar ritual in a new setting. The woman looking back is the same, but everything around her has changed. This is your room now, your mirror, your bed, your life. When Thomas returns in a cotton nightshirt and dressing gown, you're sitting on the edge of the bed, shy and unsure. He moves with care, settling on the opposite side, leaving respectful space between you. Elenina, he says quietly, I meant what I said downstairs. We have our whole lives to figure this out together. You turn to him in the dim candlelight. His hair is slightly tousled, his expression serious but kind. This is your husband. This gentle, patient man is now yours, and I'm grateful for your patience. He reaches across the space and takes your hand. The same gesture that once felt daring now carries deeper meaning. We're going to be all right, aren't we? He asks, sond beneath his calm. You hear a question. Yes, you sond, find to your surprise that you truly believe it. We're going to be all right. The first days of marriage unfold in a haze of adjustment and discovery. You learn that Thomas takes his coffee, strong and black, that he hums while shaving, that he sometimes murmurs numbers and dates in his sleep, fragments of his work life slipping into dreams. He discovers that you rise slowly, that you have firm ideas about how books should be shelved, and that you arrange flowers with an artist's eye. Mrs. Davies proves invaluable as you step into your role as mistress of the household. She shows you how to balance nourishment and budget in meals, how to manage accounts, how to coordinate cleaning and upkeep. Running even a modest home is more complex than you imagined, but also deeply fulfilling. You write your first letter as a married woman to your parents, describing your new life. The signature, your daughter, Elenina Weatherbeal, looks unfamiliar at first, but grows more natural with each use. When Thomas returns to work, you are left alone with Mrs. Davies and your own thoughts. The solitude is both freeing and daunting. For the first time, you must shape your days without guidance from parents or social expectations. You spend the morning rearranging the parlor to better catch the light. After lunch, you walk to the local shops to introduce yourself as Mrs. Weatherby of Elm Street. The baker, grocer, and fishmonger all greet you with the deference due a respectable married woman, and you begin to grasp the quiet authority your new status affords. That evening, you prepare dinner, yourself a simple meal, but one made with your own hands in your own kitchen. The pride in Thomas's eyes when you tell him makes every effort worthwhile. You're turning into quite the housewife, he says, admiration warming his voice. I'm learning, you reply. Mrs. Davies is a patient teacher. As weeks pass, you settle into the rhythm of married life. Thomas leaves each morning after breakfast and returns in the evening with stories of colleagues and the adjustments of English. Office life after his years abroad. You fill your days managing the household, writing letters, and gradually cultivating your own social circle. The physical intimacy that once seemed so daunting grows naturally as your comfort with one another deepens. Thomas is gentle and attentive, and you discover that the mysterious aspects of marriage, so rarely spoken of, are not fearsome, but tender and connecting. Your first dinner party as a married couple is a careful affair. 3 neighboring couples, chosen for their standing and compatibility. You spend days planning the menu, polishing the good china, arranging flowers in every room. The evening is a success. Conversation flows, the food is praised, and you receive warm compliments on your grace as a hostess. After the guests depart, you and Thomas sit in the parlor, savoring the quiet satisfaction of your shared debut. You were magnificent tonight, he says, loosening his collar after hours of formal restraint. I was so proud watching you manage everything so gracefully. Were you really? You ask, still glowing. Absolutely, he replies. You're going to be a wonderful addition to this community. As the seasons turn, you realize you've truly made the shift from daughter to wife, from girl to woman. The anxieties that gripped you on your wedding morning have largely faded, replaced by the steady comfort of shared domestic life. You still miss your childhood home at times. You still feel the weight of household responsibilities, but you've also found unexpected joys, the pleasure of shaping a home that reflects your tastes, the freedom to pursue painting and music without oversight, the deepening bond between you and Thomas as you meet life's small challenges side by side. One snowy evening, as you sit by the fire with your embroidery and Thomas reads the paper, you realize how completely your life has transformed. The nervous young woman who waited in her parents' parlor for his first visit feels like a stranger now. Thomas, you say softly. Setting aside your needlework, he looks up, lamplight catching the warm flecks in his eyes. I just wanted to see him happy. Truly happy. His smile spreads slowly, turning his usual seriousness boyish and bright. So am I, my dear, so am I. But inside your small house in Kensington, you've built something rare, a life that is wholly your own. Spring arrives with soft warmth, and you find yourself in the garden, kneeling among the daffodils, dirt beneath your nails, sun warming your shoulders through your cotton dress. This is a liberty unmarried women rarely enjoy. The simple joy of working the soil of your own land. Thomas finds you there when he returns from work, pleased rather than dismayed by your disheveled state. You look like you've been wrestling with the earth and winning, he says, settling beside you on the small bench he built last month. The roses needed pruning, you explain, wiping your hands on the apron you now keep for gardening. And Mrs. Davies mentioned the vegetable patch could use attention. I've discovered I rather enjoy it. This is one of marriage's quiet gifts, the freedom to explore interests once deemed unsuitable for young ladies. Your painting has flourished since hiring a proper instructor. You read novels that would have been forbidden in your parents' home and discussed them with Thomas as intellectual equals. I have news, Thomas says, leaning back with the look of a man bearing good tidings. A senior position has opened. I'm being considered for it. It would mean a significant increase in salary. Your heart leaps. Such a role would bring real responsibility and greater security, perhaps even the means to expand your household. Thomas, that's wonderful. Do you think you'll get it? The manager seemed encouraging, he says, trying and failing to hide his hope. He mentioned that my experience abroad gives me an advantage. That evening, over dinner, you talk of what this might mean: a larger home, space for the children you both desire, perhaps even a carriage of your own instead of hiring one for every journey. Yet you've also learned to cherish what you already have, the intimacy of your modest house, where every room holds memories you've made together, the satisfaction of managing your own world. The way Thomas's face lights when he finds you waiting with stories of your day. Your first wedding anniversary arrives, and you marvel at how far you've come. The bride who could barely breathe in her corset has become a confident woman who manages her household with skill, nurtures her own friendships, and navigates the emotional and physical dimensions of marriage with growing ease. You celebrate, quietly, dinner at home with your finest china and flowers from your garden, followed by a comedy at the theater that leaves you both laughing until your sides ache. Walking home through gaslit streets, your hand tucked in Thomas's arm, you realize that somewhere along the way, love has deepened beyond the careful affection of courtship into something steadier, more sustaining. Do you ever think about how we met? You ask, pausing beneath a lamppost to watch its golden light shimmer on fallen leaves. Often, he admits. I remember thinking you looked terrified that first afternoon. I was worried you might faint. I was terrified you laugh. I'd never spoken to a man I wasn't related to without my mother hovering nearby, and there you wasking about my reading and actually listening. You were the first woman I'd met, he says, his voice turning serious, who spoke to me like I was a person, not just a potential husband. Most others seemed more interested in my prospects than in me. This honesty is another gift of marriage. Freedom to speak plainly about feelings and experiences. That etiquette once silenced, you've learned that Thomas still wakes, sometimes from nightmares of his time abroad, that gray winter days can weigh heavily on his spirits. He's discovered your quick temper when provoked, your stubbornness about household matters, and that you cry over novels even when you know the characters aren't real. These imperfections haven't lessened your love, they've deepened it. You've learned that love isn't the stormy passion of romance novels, but the quiet comfort of being truly known. Winter brings unexpected trials. When Thomas falls ill with a fever that leaves him bedridden, for the first time, you feel the sharp edge of partnership, the fear that your happiness rests in another's hands. You nurse him yourself, despite Mrs. Davies's offers to handle the more difficult tasks. You read to him when he's awake, monitor his fever through the night, prepare the broths and tisans the doctor prescribes. When the fever finally breaks and his eyes focus clearly on your face for the first time in days, you understand the true weight of your vows. Hello, wife, he whispers, his voice weak but unmistakably his. Hello, husband, you reply. The relief in your own voice surprises you both. His recovery is slow. During long afternoons, when he's strong enough to sit but not to work, you talk, as you never have before, of childhood dreams, of his voyage to India, of the loneliness that nearly overwhelmed him, of the futures you each imagined before your paths crossed. I used to think I might remain unmarried. You confess one gray afternoon as you mend one of his shirts. Become one of those independent women who travel and write books and scandalize the neighbors. You still could, Thomas says quietly. You have intelligent observations about everything you read. The suggestion stuns you. Respectable women don't write books, except perhaps moral tales for children. But the idea takes root in your mind like a seed waiting for spring when warmth returns. So does good news. Thomas receives the promotion. You celebrate with a holiday by the Sitha, first true journey you've taken together since your wedding. The town is lively with couples your age, and you relish the novelty of being tourists, strolling the pier, exploring shops, walking the shore where the ocean stretches toward distant shores. It is during this holiday that you begin to suspect you are expecting your first child. The signs are subtle morning queasiness, sudden fatigue, new sensitivities to scent. You wait to be certain before telling Thomas, but the possibility lends a golden glow to everything you see. Back in London, the doctor confirms your hopes with gentle congratulations. That evening, over dinner, you share the news. Thomas's face shifts from confusion to understanding to a joy so pure it tightens your throat. A baby, he says, testing the word. Our baby. Our baby. You confirm, and suddenly you're both laughing and crying at once. The pregnancy changes everything and nothing. Your days continue much as before, yet every choice now considers the life growing within you. Mrs. Davies begins preparing the small room beside yours as a nursery. Thomas becomes almost comically protective, insisting on carrying anything heavier than a teacup, worrying if you're out of sight for too long. Your mother visits more often, full of advice, some wise, some folklore. Mrs. Davies quietly corrects. You appreciate the thread that connects you to generations of women who've walked this path before you. Your body changes gradually, then unmistakably. Dresses are altered. Cravings appear for foods you once disliked. Familiar smells suddenly repel you. Early exhaustion gives way to a burst of energy. Then, to the growing heaviness of late pregnancy, Thomas meets each stage with patience. When you can no longer tend the garden, he takes over. When walking becomes difficult, he suggests quiet evenings at home. When your usual chair no longer fits, he buys a wider one, cushioned just for you. You're being ridiculously considerate. You tell him one evening as he arranges pillows to your comfort. I'm being appropriately considerate, he corrects. You're creating a human being that seems to merit some extra attention. The baby arrives on a snowy morning, not long after your second wedding anniversary. Labor is long and demanding, but when the doctor places your daughter in your arms, the pain fades into irrelevance. She is with Thomas's brown eyes and what promises to be your determined chin. She's beautiful, Thomas whispers, settling beside you to study his daughter for the first time. She looks just like you. She looks like herself, you say, marveling as her tiny fingers grip yours with surprising strength. Hello, little one. We've been waiting for you. You name her Charlotte Hafter, the novelist whose work you've come to love. despite its scandalous reputation. Charlotte Weatherby, a name that sounds both proper and quietly adventurous. Fitting for a girl born during a blizzard with strong opinions from the start. The first months of motherhood are more exhausting than you imagined. Charlotte is a demanding infant who sleeps little and nurses often. Mrs. Davies hires her niece to help with laundry and cleaning, but much falls to you. Thomas helps as much as convention allows, taking night feedings when possible, entertaining Charlotte while you rest. I had no idea babies were such tyrants. You confess one morning after a sleepless night. She has very strong opinions for someone who can't even hold her head up. She's definitely your daughter. He replies with a grin that makes it clear this is praise, not criticism. As Charlotte grows from newborn to toddler, your household finds new rhythms. Thomas's career continues to advance. You begin writing in earnest first articles on household management, then more ambitious work. A second child, James, arrives when Charlotte is still small, followed not long after by little Mary. Your Kensington house, once perfectly suited for two, becomes delightfully chaotic with 3 children and the staff needed to care for them. By your 5th anniversary, you've become fixtures in your community. Thomas serves on the church vestry and school board. You organize charitable efforts for struggling mothers, drawing on your own experience to offer practical help rather than moralizing. Your dinner parties are known for lively talk and excellent food, and young couples often seek your counsel on the trials of early marriage. One evening, as you tuck Charlotte into bed and Thomas reads to the younger children nearby, she asks a question that catches you off guard. "Mama, how did you know Papa was the right person to marry?" You pause, brushing her dark curls, wondering how to explain Victorian courtship to a 5-year-old. "We spent time getting to know each other carefully," you say. "We talked about important things and discovered we enjoyed each other's company. But how did you know he would be a good papa?" This is harder. The man who courted you so formally was kind, but you couldn't have known he'd become the father who builds dollhouses and teaches tree names in the park. "Didn't know for certain," you admit, "but I knew he was gentle, honest, and cared about others' feelings." Those seemed like qualities that would make a good father, too. After she falls asleep, you find Thomas in the parlor. "Charlotte asked how I knew you'd be a good father." You tell him. "I said I recognized the qualities that matter: kindness, honesty, consideration." You study his face in the lamplight. "I was right, wasn't I?" "I hope so," he says quietly. "I certainly try to be." As your children grow and your marriage deepens, you often reflect on the elaborate machinery of Victorian courtship, the etiquette books, the chaperones, the formal dances of calling and visiting that now seem almost quaint. Yet somehow, within all those constraints, something real emerged. 2 strangers found each other and built a life, not the fevered passion of novels, but something more durable, a partnership rooted in mutual respect, shared values, and affection that strengthens with time. On quiet evenings, when the children sleep and the house is still, you and Thomas sit together reading or talking. The conversation flows as easily as it did on those early walks, but now it's rich with years of shared experience. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we hadn't met?" you ask one such night, looking up from a letter to your cousin. Sometimes, he admits, I had no idea babies were such tyrants, you confess one morning after a sleepless night. She has very strong opinions for someone who can't even hold her head up. She's definitely your daughter, he replies with a grin that makes it clear this is praise, not criticism. When the fever finally breaks and his eyes focus clearly on your face for the first time in days, you understand the true weight of your vows. "Hello, wife," he whispers, his voice weak, but unmistakably his. "Hello, husband," you reply. The relief in your own voice surprises you both. His recovery is slow. During long afternoons, when he's strong enough to sit but not to work, you talk as you never have before of childhood dreams, of his voyage to India, of the loneliness that nearly overwhelmed him, of the futures you each imagined before your paths crossed. "I used to think I might remain unmarried," you confess one gray afternoon as you mend one of his shirts. "Become one of those independent women who travel and write books and scandalize the neighbors." "You still could," Thomas says quietly. "You have intelligent observations about everything you read." The suggestion stuns you. Respectable women don't write books, set perhaps moral tales for children, but the idea takes root in your mind like a seed waiting for spring when warmth returns. So does good news. Thomas receives the promotion. You celebrate with a holiday by the sea, the first true journey you've taken together since your wedding. The town is lively with couples your age, and you relish the novelty of being tourists, strolling the pier, exploring shops, walking the shore where the ocean stretches toward distant shores. It is during this holiday that you begin to suspect you are expecting your first child. The signs are subtle: morning queasiness, sudden fatigue, new sensitivities to scent. You wait to be certain before telling Thomas, but the possibility lends a golden glow to everything you see. Back in London, the doctor confirms your hopes with gentle congratulations. That evening, over dinner, you share the news. Thomas's face shifts from confusion to understanding, to a joy so pure it tightens your throat. "A baby," he says, testing the word. Our baby, you confirm, and suddenly you're both laughing and crying at once. The pregnancy changes everything and nothing. Your days continue much as before, yet every choice now considers the life growing within you. Mrs. Davies begins preparing the small room beside yours as a nursery. Thomas becomes almost comically protective, insisting on carrying anything heavier than a teacup. Worrying if you're out of sight for too long, your mother visits more often. Full of advice, some wise, some folklore, Mrs. Davies quietly corrects. You appreciate the thread that connects you to generations of women who've walked this path before you. Your body changes gradually, then unmistakably. Dresses are altered. Cravings appear for foods you once disliked. Familiar smells suddenly repel you. Early exhaustion gives way to a burst of energy. Then to the growing heaviness of late pregnancy. Thomas meets each stage with patience. When you can no longer tend the garden, he takes over. When walking becomes difficult, he suggests quiet evenings at home. When your usual chair no longer fits, he buys a wider one, cushioned just for you. You're being ridiculously considerate. You tell him one evening as he arranges pillows to your comfort. "I'm being appropriately considerate," he corrects. "You're creating a human being. That seems to merit some extra attention." The baby arrives on a snowy morning, not long after your second wedding anniversary. Labor is long and demanding, but when the doctor places your daughter in your arms, the pain fades into eras. Charlotte grows from newborn to toddler. Your household finds new rhythms. Thomas's career continues to advance. You begin writing in earnest first articles on household management, then more ambitious work. A second child, James, arrives when Charlotte is still small, followed not long after by little Mary. Your Kensington house, once perfectly suited for two, becomes delightfully chaotic with 3 children and the staff needed to care for them. By your 5th anniversary, you've become fixtures in your community. Thomas serves on the church vestry and school board. You organize charitable efforts for struggling mothers, drawing on your own experience to offer practical help rather than moralizing. Your dinner parties are known for lively talk and excellent food, and young couples often seek your counsel on the trials of early marriage. One evening, as you tuck Charlotte into bed and Thomas reads to the younger children nearby, she asks a question that catches you off guard. How did you know Papa was the right person to marry? You pause, brushing her dark curls, wondering how to explain Victorian courtship to a 5-year-old. We spent time getting to know each other carefully. You say, we talked about important things and discovered we enjoyed each other's company. But how did you know he would be a good papa? This is harder. The man who courted you so formally was kind, but you couldn't have known he'd become the father who builds doll houses and teaches tree names in the park. Didn't know for certain, you admit. But I knew he was gentle, honest, and cared about others' feelings. Those seemed like qualities that would make a good father, too. After she falls asleep, you find Thomas in the parlor. Charlotte asked how I knew you'd be a good father. You tell him. I said I recognized the qualities that matter: kindness, honesty, consideration. You study his face in the lamplight. I was right, wasn't I? I hope so, he says quietly. I certainly try to be. As your children grow and your marriage deepens, you often reflect on the elaborate machinery of Victorian courtship etiquette books, the chaperones, the formal dances of calling and visiting that now seem almost quaint. Within all those constraints, something real emerged. 2 strangers found each other and built a life, not the fevered passion of novels, but something more durable, a partnership rooted in mutual respect, shared values, and affection that strengthens with time. On quiet evenings, when the children sleep and the house is still, you and Thomas sit together, reading or talking. The conversation flows as easily as it did on those early walks, but now it's rich with years of shared experience. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we hadn't met? You ask one such night, looking up from a letter to your cousin. Sometimes, he admits, but I can't imagine it clearly anymore. This life with you and the children feels like the only real possibility. The world changes around you. Railways shrink distances. Gaslight pushes back winter darkness. Photography captures your children's faces at every stage, yet the heart of domestic life remains constant. Children need care. Homes need tending. Marriages thrive on daily kindness. Looking back on your journey, from nervous girl to confident wife and mother, you see that the rigid structures of Victorian courtship, for all their artifice, served a purpose. They gave two strangers time to evaluate character before committing to a lifetime. The supervision, the rules, the gradual progression from acquaintance to engagement, these weren't just restrictions. They created space for discovery. You and Thomas learned each other's minds before sharing your bodies, your values before pledging your futures. Young people today might find such caution unbearable, but there was wisdom in taking time, in building love on friendship and respect, not just passion. As you prepare for bed, you feel deep gratitude for the peculiar social machinery that brought you together. Without those etiquette books and chaperones, without calling hours and supervised walks, you might never have discovered that a serious man from India and a thoughtful young woman from London could create something beautiful. Your story began with a knock at the door on a spring afternoon. Two carefully dressed people in a flower-filled parlor, wondering if they could build a life together. It continues now in a house full of children's laughter and the comfortable silence of a couple who have learned to be truly at home with each other. The Victorian era, with all its propriety and rules, provided a framework within which love could grow slowly and surely like roses in a walled garden. And sometimes that patient tending yields something rare and lasting, a partnership that weathers illness and change. The trials of parenthood, the quiet daily work of caring for another's happiness as your own in the end. That's what dating was like in the Victorian era, spontaneous romance. But something more deliberate, perhaps more enduring. A careful dance that allowed two people to discover whether they could trust each other with their dreams, their futures, their deepest hopes, as you drift toward sleep in the bed you've shared for years. Thomas breathing steadily beside you and your children, safe in their rooms. You understand you've taken part in one of humanity's oldest endeavors, the dance of courtship and commitment, played out according to the customs of your time. The world will keep changing. Future generations will find their own paths to love. But the longing for connection, for someone to share life's joys and sorrows will remain. And maybe, just maybe, there was wisdom in moving slowly, in building love, not on passion alone, but on patience, respect, and the steady work of knowing another. Soul, the last thing you remember before sleep, claims you is Thomas's hand, finding yours across the pillows, a gesture as natural as breathing. After all these years, tomorrow will bring its own challenges and pleasures. But tonight, you rest in the quiet certainty that the careful dance of Victorian courtship led you exactly where you belong.